Thank you, Catherine. Good morning. When I would visit my grandparents as a very young person, there were a few absolute truths in that house. One of them was that Wheel of Fortune was to be watched every weeknight without fail. It was through these experiences that I came to form a relationship with Pat Sajak and admired the very human way he interacted with contestants on the show. Back in those days, if you remember, when it came time for the final round, the show's announcer told the contestant what prize they'd be playing for. Sometimes it'd be a car, sometimes an exotic vacation to Branson, or maybe a lime green living room furniture group. Well, many years later, I remember when the final round was revamped, and now the final contestant spins a small wheel to randomly select a folded prize card which would say the grand prize they'll be playing for. Once the final round is over, Pat, or now I guess Ryan, opens the card to show the person what they had either won or lost. I haven't watched Wheel of Fortune in a long time, but I think it still works that way. Last year, during Epiphany, Pastor Alyssa invited us into a simple and similar little practice. She channeled her inner Pat Sajak and asked each of us to reach into a basket and choose a star word for the year. Not as a New Year's resolution, not a goal, not something we were required to accomplish, but simply a word to pay attention to. And every word was different on every single star. A word that we might carry with us and notice as 2025 unfolded. If you were here a year ago, you might remember the basket she had with all of the little stars in it. I was one of the last to draw a word after the Epiphany service was over. And when I saw Alyssa coming toward me at the organ, I was excited. What would my word be? Maybe wealth or Caribbean cruise, or heck, even lime green furniture would have been great. I reached into the basket, rustled around the remaining stars without looking, wanted to be completely fair, and I took the one that popped into my hand and I looked at it, and the word that I drew was discernment, which sounds very calm and spiritual until you realize that discernment usually means there's a question coming whether you are ready for it or not. Discernment is rarely loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. Most of the time, it feels like waiting, like sitting quietly with a question you'd rather hurry past. I showed my star word to Pastor Alyssa after I drew it, and she laughed in a pastoral way, because she knew that about 6 months prior, she had asked me if I would ever consider becoming ordained a deacon in the United Methodist Church. And I told her at the time I'd think about it. So then I drew that word, discernment, and she laughed, almost like she planned it. Maybe all the stars had that word on it. I don't know. Hopefully not. Then a couple of weeks ago, Epiphany came around again, 2026. Here we are. And Pastor Alyssa invited us to choose star words once more. I really thought this is going to be my year. I'd spin the little wheel and get Mediterranean cruise or winning Powerball ticket. But alas, no, this year the word I received was clarity. I'm clearly doing this wrong. Not certainty, not answers, not a neatly typed plan from God, just clarity. And clarity didn't arrive as a command or a commandment. It didn't tell me what to do. It simply named something that had been quietly forming for a long time, a sense that standing still was beginning to feel less faithful than taking a step. I think that's how Epiphany light usually works. Not as a spotlight, but as a soft glow. just enough to see what's already in our hands. In a cafeteria, the first thing you do is put a tray into your hands. You grab a tray, you slide it down the rail, and then a lot of honesty happens as you make a series of some very personal, very revealing decisions. A little of this looks good. That smells nice. Oh, I'm going to get some of that. And then you get to the end of the line and you see the liver and onions. Nope. You say to yourself, that's for some other, much braver person. Nobody goes to a cafeteria expecting to eat everything. The whole point is choice. You take what appeals to you. You leave the rest behind. And if you're honest, and I hope we can be honest with each other this morning, a lot of us approach faith and Christianity the same way. Not because we don't love Jesus, not because we don't believe, but because we've learned how to follow selectively. We take the parts of Jesus that feel nourishing to us, grace, comfort, forgiveness, hope, and we quietly slide past the parts that feel heavy or inconvenient, the liver and the onions, like they might upset the careful balance of our lives. Or like opening ourselves to discernment. We love the Jesus who says, "Come to me, all you who are weary." We get a little quieter around the Jesus who says, "Take up your cross." We're grateful for mercy. We're less enthusiastic about the moments when we are asked to offer it to someone who we don't think has earned it. And if that makes you a bad Christian, then we're all in trouble, because that's not rebellion, that's humanity. That is why I love the radical honesty of today's gospel that Catherine just read to us. Jesus doesn't stand on the shore of the Sea of Galilee giving a lecture about discipleship. He doesn't hand out brochures. He simply walks past people in the middle of their ordinary work days and says, "Follow me." 2 words, no explanation, no menu. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, I think, because follow me doesn't come with options. Jesus doesn't say, take what you like and leave the rest. He doesn't say, start with the easy parts. He just keeps walking as if to say that discipleship is something you discover by moving, not something you master by standing still. Jesus said, "Follow me," and the fishermen don't leave their nets because the fishing is bad. And really, they can't afford to leave their nets. Those nets feed families. Those nets pay the bills. Those nets create stability. Fishing nets are good things until they quietly become the boundaries of our imagination. And once you've seen something new, once a different life begins to shimmer just a little bit, like the star, those same good nets can start to feel heavy in your hands. Last week, we talked about learning how to see, how baptism gives us the capacity to notice where God is already at work. If we choose to live into that gift, in a way, that's what discernment trained me to do last year, to keep my eyes open, to pay attention, to notice what questions kept returning even when I tried to set them aside. This week is about what happens when that seeing begins to ask something of us, because clarity doesn't mean certainty. It's not a lightning bolt from heaven. It's more like that quiet moment when the Wheel of Fortune grand prize is revealed. Not something you controlled, not something you chose, but suddenly something that's simply there, asking to be faced. It simply means we can no longer pretend we haven't noticed. And most of us don't reject Jesus outright. If anything, most of us are trying very hard to be faithful with what we've been given. The star words we've drawn, the lives we've inherited, the responsibilities already in our hands. We just follow him carefully. We follow him as long as he doesn't rearrange our calendars too much. We follow him as long as the cost stays theoretical. We follow him until he starts tugging at something we were hoping to keep neatly in place. We follow Jesus, just maybe not all the way. And that's not because we're faithless. It's because, like we said, following is hard. I think it's much easier to admire Jesus than it is to imitate him. It's easier to believe in love than to practice it when it costs us something real. It's easier to carry grace on a cafeteria tray than to keep walking when the plate starts to feel heavy. But throughout the Gospels, Jesus never says, "Follow me partially." He says, "Follow me." And then he keeps walking patiently beside his disciples, all of us, as we learn slowly and imperfectly what that actually means. Because discipleship isn't about doing everything at once. It's about expansion. Over time, the Spirit keeps nudging us back to the line and gently asking, what about this part too? What about generosity when it stretches you? What about forgiveness when it feels unfair? I hate that. What about justice when it unsettles your comfort? Not as a demand, not as a threat, but as an invitation to a fuller life. The beautiful thing is that Jesus doesn't stand at the end of the cafeteria line grading our trays. He knows the star words each of us has drawn. He knows the seasons we're in individually. He knows some years are about discernment, learning to wait, and some years are about clarity, realizing that waiting forever isn't faithfulness either. He knows we start small. He knows we grow slowly. He knows faith is learned by practice, not perfection. The disciples don't get this right immediately. They argue, they misunderstand, panic, and fail in spectacular ways. And still, Jesus keeps calling them forward. Most of the time, following Christ doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary. It looks like choosing kindness when bitterness would be easier, listening instead of dismissing, telling the truth when silence feels safer, showing up when it would cost less to stay home. That kind of faith rarely makes headlines, but it changes lives. So, applying all of this to ourselves, maybe the invitation this morning isn't for us to dump our trays in the trash or to feel guilty about what we may have been avoiding. Maybe it's simply for us to notice what we keep skipping, not with shame, not with fear, just with curiosity. What part of Jesus have we quietly decided aren't really meant for us? What teaching do you admire from a distance but hesitate to practice up close? Because Jesus isn't asking us to choke down the liver and onions all at once. He's asking whether you trust him enough to take one more step down the line. Just one little bite of liver, just one, just a taste. What does this mean for me? I don't know. Hypothetically, I love the idea of being ordained as a deacon, but the moment I start thinking about it honestly, two things immediately rise to the surface: time and money for the required theological coursework. And I don't say that as an excuse. I say it because time and money are real, just like with the disciples and their fishing nets. They are the things that keep life running. They pay the bills. They keep the calendar from falling apart. They help us feel responsible and grounded. In that sense, time and money are my fishing nets. Not bad things, not sinful things, but necessary things, good things, the kinds of things that hold life together. And that's what makes them complicated, because Jesus never asks people to drop bad things. He asks them to notice when even good things start to define the limits of what they believe is possible. The question isn't whether I have enough time or enough money. The deeper question is this: what am I trusting to hold my life together? And what am I afraid might unravel even if I loosen my grip even just a little? Right now, to be honest, I have it pretty easy. I get to stand up here once in a while and do this as a complete hack. I can be imperfect. I can stumble. I can say the wrong thing now and then, and it's okay because I have no idea what I'm doing. And yes, Jesus said, you have to forgive me. That part is non-negotiable. It's great. You should all try this. Clarity will come in time. Epiphany, like we said, doesn't flood the whole sky with light. It's more like that small starward we carry, not telling us the whole journey, not promising the prize we hoped for, but offering just enough glow to take the next step. It gives just enough to move, and sometimes following Jesus is nothing more and nothing less than choosing not to stand still when love is already walking ahead of you. Follow me, he says, not as a demand shouted from the heavens, but as a gentle invitation spoken into whatever word you happen to be carrying this year. Not because any of us have figured everything out, but because life is waiting, and Jesus is waiting for us to take the first step. Amen. And now let's sing about it, shall we? Stand up if you'd like. We're going to do Lord, You Have Come to the Lakeshore. It's number 344 in your United Methodist hymnal. Walt and Kirsten will sing it with you, and the words will also be up on the screen.